Thank you for your time, and thank you for accepting me as a guest in your country. It's not always easy to travel to Pakistan from India, but by the grace of God, we could do it.
It's because of our relationship, what India is becoming. I'm scared of for all my Indian friends, where it's heading right now. For an educated Indian, it must be frightening growing up in India right now.
Right. So as you can imagine, I wanted also to meet you to talk about three main subjects. The first one, of course, is Afghanistan, because it's become a concern for you as well. As you know, Pakistan has not recognized the new regime at the moment. Could you explain me what are the consideration for Pakistan to recognize the new regime? Why is it not recognized yet, and what are the conditions that you have to recognize the new Taliban regime?
Well, firstly, Pakistan wants to take all the regional countries surrounding Afghanistan. So we want to take a step, all of them collectively. It should be Pakistan alone. If it takes a steps, it's just too much international pressure on us, and we are really trying to get ourselves on our feet economically. My government came and the country was bankrupt. We didn't have money to pay our liabilities. So therefore, our main consideration right now is our economy. And our economy can only lift it up if we have a good relationship with the world. And therefore, the last thing we want is isolation, by being the only country. But having said that, I believe that the only way forward, if we are looking for the well-being of almost 40 million Afghan citizens, is to sooner or later recognize the government. Because there is no other alternative right now. There's not even, when the Taliban were in power last time, there was a Northern Alliance where there was a conflict going on. There's no conflict now in Afghanistan, which is, by the way, after 40 years, this is the first time the country is conflict-free, apart from, small terrorist organizations, which the more stability in Afghanistan, the less chance of any of these international terrorists to survive there. So I feel that the only way forward is recognition. Pakistan can't do it alone. I think we are consulting all the regional countries. But, for the well-being of the people of Afghanistan, sooner or later, they will have to recognize Afghanistan. Now, the question is, what are the conditions? Now, as far as I can see from, there's an international consensus that there should be one inclusive government. And number two, human rights, specifically female rights, women rights. So the Taliban government pledged both. They've talked about human rights and they've talked about inclusive government. Now the question is, what will it take for the world to be satisfied that the Taliban meet the condition? Right. This is really the condition, because they've agreed to the two conditions.
So actually, you're talking about women's rights, for example. When Mr. Mutaki was here in Islamabad for the OIC summit, for example, this issue of women's rights, was it raised with him, and what did he say? I mean, as you know, so far in some provinces, universities are still closed for women. Some schools are also still closed. Did he give concrete word on this issue? Was he accurate?
It's not concrete. They agreed to the principle. Right. How they will go about it, if anyone is familiar with the Afghan character, they should realize that they are very, very proud people. And, you can't push them. They hate outside interference. In 2001, Pakistan was one of the three countries that recognized Afghanistan. Yet when Pakistan tried to tell the Taliban, to hand over Osama bin Laden to the Americans, they point blank refused. So there's a limit to what outside interference or pressure can do to a government, specifically a government which is fiercely independent like the Taliban. So just a caution that if anyone thinks that you can force them, force the pace of what they believe is an inclusive government and human rights, well, it's not going to happen. And we should not expect, what we expect women's rights, according to what the people of Afghanistan think and what are Western women's rights. There's a big gulf between the two, and that's not going to happen. Western-style women's rights, if that is an expectation in Afghanistan, will not happen. But they've agreed that girls should be allowed to study. So that's there's no, at least that one point they have. When they came here, they agreed.
Right.
They said we are just taking our time. We are seeing the right conditions, but they've agreed to that.
Right. So, as far as the security concerns I'd like to know a bit more about the security concerns you have coming from Afghanistan. More precisely, you know that the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan has bases in eastern Afghanistan, especially Loya-Paktia. There are also the possibility that some Baloch insurgent groups could be also active from Afghanistan. They've carried out a couple of attacks against Pakistan recently. Are these some of your most pressing concerns that you have at the moment?
Two concerns. Number one are the refugees. Pakistan already has over 3 million Afghan refugees. And the worry is, if things deteriorate in Afghanistan, if this humanitarian crisis gets worse, then there will be a bigger flow of refugees into the country. Already, we have almost, since the fall of Kabul, we have almost 240,000 Afghans who've come into Pakistan. So number one, I mean, the country just cannot take more refugees. We don't have the resources. And secondly, before the fall of Kabul, 3 groups operated from Afghanistan. Number one was the TTP, Pakistan Taliban. Number 2 was Baloch terrorists. And number 3 was ISIL. So our belief is that the more stable the Afghan government gets, the less chance of these groups to operate from there.
Right.
So therefore we have reasons, probably Pakistan has the strongest reason for stability in Afghanistan for these reasons, refugees and terrorism.
Right. So it means that when the Afghan Taliban are saying that they will not allow their country to be used by terrorist organization against any other country, do you trust them when they say that?
Yes, I trust them.
Right.
I think anyone who has who dealt with the Afghan Taliban, and I'm talking even of in 2000, one thing you can say is that they used to stick to their word. I mean, when when our truckers or people used to go, after the Taliban took over, when they used to go to Afghanistan, previously, after every 50 miles, there was a warlord who used to take money. When Taliban came into power, basically there was complete security everywhere. And when they guaranteed security, you got it. So we believe that they will, because it's in their interest. What Taliban or government would want most of all is to look after their people, and they can only look after them if there's security and trade.
Right.
So I think yes, as I said, not only our government, all the neighbors believe that stability in Afghanistan is extremely important. For Central Asian republics, Afghanistan, from Pakistan and Central Asian republics' point of view, it connects Pakistan. Through Afghanistan, we get connected to Central Asia, and they get connected to the Indian Ocean, where they can take the goods out. So all of us are interested in stability there.
Right. So when the UN points out that the Taliban still have connections with Al-Qaeda and other foreign jihadist organizations, you think these concerns are not justified?
Well, you see, the Taliban will suffer if there's, if there's terrorism from Taliban soil, international terrorism, then they are going to suffer. So it's in their interest to stop the international terrorism.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about France a bit. Can you tell me about how do you see the trajectory of the French-Pakistan relation for this year and the years to come? How would you like to boost the bilateral relationship?
I think France is a very important country for Pakistan. Firstly, I mean, Pakistan has half its exports, almost half, are into the European Union. France is one of the most important countries and a trading partner. So my Pakistan's main interest is to fix our economy, make our country stand on its feet, care about the 220 million Pakistanis. So therefore, my main interest is the economy. And because of that, France is extremely important for us.
What are your requirements? What are your plans or ideas to strengthen this bilateral relationship? Do you have any particular ideas in mind that you would like to implement?
Well, I mean, because of COVID, there was hardly any international travel or communication. You had virtual meetings everywhere. So, but ideally, I would like to meet President Macron and discuss our bilateral ties. Yes.
Right. Have you been able to plan a phone call with him so far?
Yes, I've spoken to President Macron twice.
Okay. Okay. So when do you think Pakistan will appoint an ambassador in Paris?
I think we are in the process of doing so.
Right. Okay. 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 Of course, I would like to talk to you about the bilateral relation between India and Pakistan, which you've mentioned at the beginning of this interview, these big two nuclear powers of South Asia. Would you say that, so the abrogation of the autonomy of Jammu and Kashmir was completely unexpected for everyone. Would you say that Pakistan's security concerns vis-à-vis India has increased since then?
Yes. It was the 5th August 2019 decision of India to change unilaterally the status of Kashmir. That was the beginning when our relationship just well, there is no relationship since then, because this is going against the United Nations Security Council resolution. And not just that, it is the way the RSS-led BJP government in India, the way it has conducted its policy towards Pakistan and specifically towards Kashmir. It is, I'm afraid, right now, there's a lot of anxiety in our part of the world that we are not dealing with a rational government. We're dealing with a government which ideology is based on hate towards Muslims, towards minorities, specifically towards Pakistan. And it's not a rational government where we can talk to them.
Right. So do you have still this concern that India has not accepted the creation of Pakistan?
No, I think it's, that they have to accept. The issue is simply that they are, to resolve our difference, the main difference is Kashmir. That's the main difference. And that's why when I came into power, my first step was to extend a hand of friendship to Narendra Modi. And, I know India better than most Pakistanis. So my idea was that we should have a neighborly relationship, and our only difference is Kashmir, and to settle that through dialogue. But the response we have got, I was quite surprised at the response I got from the Indian Prime Minister. And then Pulwama happened, where a young Kashmiri boy blows himself up an Indian convoy, and they blame us for it. And then they bomb Pakistan. And then, of course, we downed one of their planes, and then we returned their pilot, just to tell them that we didn't want any escalation. But it was just their attitude, the attitude of this Modi government. So there is no relationship right now. And at the moment, what should I say? There's just a stalemate.
So what do you think can be done? How can Pakistan build friendly relations with India? What is there a first step or anything Pakistan could do to improve this?
Yes, we can build a relationship with India, but it has to start from them going back to that step they took on 5th August 2019. They have to, restore the status of Kashmir, because that's a violation of international law.
Right. This is the only condition you have.
Yes, go back to 5th August 2019,
right.
And yes, we can talk after that.
Otherwise, there will be no negotiation, no behind the door kind of secret negotiation to try to do something.
It is the biggest betrayal. To negotiate would be betrayal of people of Kashmir who've suffered so much. 100,000 Kashmiris have died so far in what was their right guaranteed by the international community through the United Nations Security Council resolution that they would be allowed to decide their own destiny through a plebiscite. And so, denying them that and then using force, 800,000 troops, which have basically kept the people of Kashmir in an open prison. There's no way we can move forward until they restore that status.
And indeed, actually, it's very interesting because very regularly I receive the press release from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that condemns the use of force and torture in Kashmir. But let me ask you something that I have in mind. Pakistan regularly denounces this, and I completely understand. On the other hand, it doesn't talk about the repression of the Muslims in Xinjiang. So my question is, do you think that maybe this lack of consistency could also dent the credibility of the accusation that Pakistan has on India, on what India is doing in Kashmir?
Well, let's just first see. The status of Xinjiang is that it is part of China. Right. It's not a dispute. Right. It's recognized as part of China. The state of Kashmir is that this was in 1948 accepted by the international community, that it was a disputed territory between Pakistan and India. So number one, the status of Kashmir. Number two, the people of Kashmir were guaranteed that they would, and accepted by India, that through a plebiscite, they would decide whether they wanted to go to Pakistan or India. That plebiscite never took place. Kashmir had a special status in the Indian Constitution. Unilaterally, 2019, India removed that status. So firstly, it is a completely different, it's between Pakistan and India, it's a disputed land. Right. That's why Pakistan speaks about people of Kashmir, because 1/3 of Kashmir is in Pakistan. Right. And there are a lot of Kashmiri refugees from Indian side who are living in Pakistan. So therefore, it is direct concern to Pakistan.
Okay.
So what happens to Muslims all over the world? Just from Syria to Libya to Somalia, Iraq, Muslims are going through a lot right now. But my specific concern right now is Kashmir as a disputed territory between Pakistan and India.
Right. Okay. So let's finish with the subject of the cooperation between the United States and Pakistan. You've been criticizing a lot the US-Pakistan partnership after 2001. After the US withdrew from Afghanistan, there was this over-the-horizon policy which was announced. How do you see Pakistan's participation in this over-the-horizon strategy envisioned by President Biden? Does it appeal to you? And have you seen some concrete response from you or from the US on this? What can be done exactly?
But first, just let me just be clear. Pakistan has very good relationship with the US. We've always had good relationship with the US. There were aspects of the relationship which I have always criticized. And the main aspect which I criticized was this war on terror and in Afghanistan. I never thought there would be a military solution in Afghanistan. For a start, there was no clear idea what they had come to do in Afghanistan. Was it nation building? Was it women's rights? Was it human rights? What were they doing there, or bringing in democracy? So because there were never clear aims, no one knew what they were doing in Afghanistan. I don't think the Americans knew what they were doing there. So what was victory in Afghanistan? No one knew that. So I criticized the Afghanistan adventure throughout, saying there was no military solution, whatever they're trying to achieve. Secondly, Pakistan's participation in the US war on terror. I did not want Pakistan to participate in it, only for one reason. In the 80s, Pakistan had helped the US in fight the Soviets in Afghanistan, arming the Mujahideen and calling jihad the jihadis were heroes because they were fighting foreign occupation against the Soviets. We trained them along with CIA. 10 years later, 89, the Soviets leave, and then come 2001, the US arrives in Afghanistan. Now we are trying to tell the same people who had been trained to fight foreign occupation, now we are telling them that fighting the US occupation is terrorism. So they turned against us. Okay. My point was we should have stayed neutral. So the Pakistani Taliban turned against us because all the operations against the Soviets took place from the tribal areas, adjoining districts to Afghanistan. They became Pakistan Taliban who turned against us. And secondly, the old Mujahideen groups, they turned against us, like Al-Qaeda. So Pakistan lost 80,000 people. I mean, which ally of the US lost so many people? And yet Pakistan got blamed for the failure in Afghanistan. So I disagreed with that. But apart from that, right now we have shared aim with the US. We want no terrorism from Afghanistan. We are against international terrorism. So is the US. So we have a shared interest. And I hope that US also realizes that they originally came to Afghanistan to fight international terrorism, Al-Qaeda. And now if it goes into chaos, you could end up the same position again. So therefore, we have a shared interest for stability in Afghanistan.
Okay, so does that mean that Pakistan will participate in this over-the-horizon policy strategy?
It can only happen with the permission of the Taliban government. And if they allow it, then it can happen. But otherwise, last thing we want is another conflict with this now Afghan government. After having lost 80,000 people now, Pakistan cannot afford another conflict. So we will be partners in peace with the US, but not in conflict.
Okay. Let me ask you a bit of a personal question, but when I was living in Pakistan at the end of the 2009-2013, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton came to Pakistan for a visit, and she was asked by a student in Lahore that you Americans, you abandoned us after 89. What are the guarantees that we have that you will not abandon us again? Now, the United States have shifted their priorities away from this region. Do you feel that you've been betrayed again?
Frankly, I don't blame the United States. I blame our own leadership. The job of the leadership of this country is to protect the interest of its own people. It's not the job of the United States to protect the interest of Pakistani people.
Right.
So why did Pakistan allow itself to be used? Clearly, we became part of the US war against the Soviets through Afghanistan, in 80s. But once that was over, a year later, sanctions were slapped on Pakistan. So Pakistan should have learned then. That's why I opposed, Pakistan joining the US war on terror after 2001, because number one, we had trained these Mujahideen to fight foreign occupation. Now, how were we going to stop them? And when we joined them, they turned against us. But secondly, we felt used after, when we were in 91, these pressless sanctions were imposed on Pakistan. After Pakistan was neighboring, we had 4 million Afghan refugees. We had Kalashnikovs in us, first time. We had sectarian militant groups left in Pakistan, fallout of the Afghan jihad in the 80s. So now, by joining them, I opposed it. I thought we should stay neutral. But I still remember George Bush's statement saying that we will not abandon Pakistan again.
Yeah.
And they did.
Okay. Last question. Do you have any plan to visit France? Is there any official visit for France which could be in the pipeline anytime soon, or is it something that you could do?
Not yet, but yes, of course, I would like to visit France.
Right. After Prime Minister Gilani in 2011, it's been 11 years since Pakistani Prime Minister visited France, but I hope it will happen. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Prime Minister.